Okay, I think we're live. We're streaming on Facebook and YouTube. It's good to be here. It's great to see wonderful colleagues and friends that we actually got to see this summer, which was awesome. We got to make music this summer, and we're gonna talk about that. But anyway, it's great to be here. My name's John Kilkenny, and I'm director of the Swanee Summer Music Festival. I have some great friends and colleagues here. We're going to talk about college auditions and maybe some career Q and A's for students and parents, and options for professional development, maybe beyond the binary choices of performance and music education for students. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. I've already introduced myself, and so I'll go to Patrick. Hello, sir.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Patrick Hansen. I am the Director of Opera Studies at Mcgill University, and coming to you from Alexandria, Ontario.
Great. Welcome, Patrick. Hilary, you're the next person on my screen.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Hilary Dow Ward, and I am the Managing Director of Swanee Summer Music Festival, and I also have the privilege of teaching as a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Music and the School of Theology here at the University of the South.
All right. Dr. Moon.
Hello, my name is Gene Moon. I'm the Director of Orchestral Studies and Opera Theater here at California Baptist University in Riverside, California.
Great. Mr. Burrow, sir.
Hi, I'm Chad Burrow. I am professor of clarinet at the University of Michigan.
Donna, my friend.
My name is Donna Shin. I am the flute professor at the University of Washington. I'm also chair of woodwind and brass studies, and I'm in from Seattle, Washington.
Great. So for those watching, you could ask questions in the comments of either our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. We'll see all of those. And yeah, please let us know if you have any questions. So we're going to start. The first thing tonight I wanted to try to get us to get some feedback on is mistakes that we made as younger artists auditioning for college. Things that maybe that we did. And you could take this a couple different directions if you do want to talk about mistakes you see pretty regularly with students, but really looking back on our own experiences, because we are all in the profession and we've achieved a level of success despite the mistakes that we may have made. So what are some of the things that we did that you would like to try to help students that are watching this or your own students avoid? And maybe anyone want to take that first, or I'll just pick somebody.
I made a lot of mistakes, so I mean.
Okay. Patrick, please, sir.
I made so many mistakes. First of all, I didn't really do much research into the faculty. I was I'm originally from Iowa. I was a piano major. I was looking to audition for piano degrees and for the bachelor's degree. And so I figured every college would want the same kind of repertoire requirements. I figured that I could just go with, my show and show up and do the audition, and my first audition was at Drake University, which had sort of strict requirements. Luckily I had that, and then I was auditioning at Northwestern University. They had completely sort of different requirements. Again, just luck that I got in. I eventually actually ended up at Simpson College, where I got my bachelor's degree, but I didn't do any research into the faculty. I sort of knew who might be teaching somewhere. This was, of course, before it was easy to research. I mean, it was a little, back then you had to get the catalogs and you had to kind of look through the catalogs, and you had to kind of go, now it's Googleable. But I didn't do any of the research to the faculty, and I didn't contact any faculty prior to my audition. So it was just sort of a cold, audition walking in. And I wish I had not done that.
I think we can all relate to that. I think I would just copy and paste exactly what Patrick said. I was living in Korea at the time, and so making a phone call to the US wasn't even an option. And it was, I remember recording my audition on a DAT tape. Is that what they're called back then? DAT. And just sending it in. And fortunately, though, I had a piano teacher who was already a university professor in Korea, who was already able to tell me this is what they're going to expect. And then I just sent it out to 5 different institutions. But knowing what resources we have now, I agree with Patrick. I would have researched and learned more about the faculty.
Donna, now I'm going to start randomly calling them. Everybody be ready. You didn't know
Sure.
there was a test part of this here. But.
I think when it comes to the audition, when you're there, I think a big mistake of mine, or just an assumption, was that it had to be perfect and that I couldn't make a mistake. And if I made a mistake, oh, there goes the audition. But the truth is in every single audition, there are mistakes everywhere. And that's not really the point. And that's not what the reviewers, the faculty are listening for. It's actually, there's wonderful opportunity to show your grit, your toughness, and your expression. If you can follow up all your, don't go into the audition worrying if I make a mistake, but rather prepare yourself when I make a mistake, I'm going to, and then fill in the blank. Like, play more expressively, balloon my sound so that it's more lovely, or whatever that may be. So I think it's about that perfectionism can be very damaging, but worrying about, when you make a mistake, I think that when it comes to the audition, I think some of the performance anxiety can come also from that perfectionism that you're striving to achieve.
That's great. So before we leave our mistakes here, I'll admit some of my own at the end, but Chad or Hilary, anything to share about your journey? Yeah, Chad, please, and then Hilary.
Yeah, just one common thing that I see a lot of students do that I certainly was guilty of, and that is picking repertoire that was as humanly hard as possible. In other words, I wanted to pick the most advanced repertoire that I could barely play, rather than the repertoire that showed my strengths, that showed the level at which I played well at the time. Of course, we want to play these difficult things, and it's good to challenge ourselves, but you want to show your strengths in any audition. So it's okay to play pieces that are well worn, that you've studied for a long time, that you've got a lot of confidence with, that may not be the newest thing that you're learning at the moment. It's important, I think, to cultivate to your strengths and what you're comfortable with, and not just try to pick the most difficult pieces to play or sing or conduct.
When I went to interview or audition, excuse me, I'm now in a little bit different path, but when I went to audition, I was auditioning for 2 different instruments for a performance program, and I ended up attending at a larger state school of music. And when I went to audition that day, they said, well, how do you think you're going to do that? Major in both of these instruments. And I didn't have my story straight at the time. I figured it out, but I would say if you're planning to major in 2 instruments, get your story straight and how you think that might be achievable. And second to that, regardless of whether you are a pre-college student preparing for your university or conservatory audition, or if you are in that phase auditioning then for graduate auditions, I would highly encourage you to go run your audition material in a space that is not where you're used to doing it. So if you practice at home, or you practice in your teacher's studio, or you practice in your university's black box, or whatever it may be, those spaces that you're used to hearing your voice, or used to hearing your instrument, or that keyboard that you're used to playing on, go to as many churches or synagogues or wherever you have access to or can gain access to run your repertoire, so that you're not jolted by hearing your sound different, whether the space be different or the acoustics be different, so that you have a different sense of what your sound might be like, because that could surprise you on that day. And that's not something that you would want to change your game that you have worked so hard to achieve. So those are my 2 things. Make sure you got your story straight, and make sure that you've run your rep lots of times in a lot of different places.
These are all great points, and I definitely want to go back a little bit later to the story discussion, because I think that how students present themselves before the audition, the type of email communication that you have with faculty, of course, what you do in the room or on the stage, depending on the audition, also really matters. So we're going to talk about that in a second, but I think I'd like to move us towards, we've all made mistakes, and we have to address those. I think what I've heard, we should be sure to help our students address those. I think I heard do your research, pick repertoire that's appropriate, which I want to revisit again. And then the points that came forward from Hilary about, have your story, and also really be sure that you have a sense of experience playing this repertoire in different places. So these are all really great points. So common mistakes. I think this is something all of us on here have, I think, more years of experience than we may want to admit, listening to auditions and being on both sides of the desk in terms of preparing students for graduate auditions or doctoral auditions, and then of course hearing dozens or more than that every year. So we're talking about some common mistakes, things we see over and over again that you wish you could build a time machine and go back and get that student to not do that. And I'm going to go first. I'm not going to talk about students. I'm going to talk about parents. And I'm going to say to any parents that are watching, and I am not a parent, so I realize I think I might be the only one on this call who's not. So apologies in advance. I know it's easy to say and much harder to actually do when it's your own child. But you need to let your child guide the process. I have far too many conversations when I'm with parents in my studio, and I'll ask their child, so why do you want to major in music? And then the parent answers that question. Or I'll ask, so what do you want to do music education? Why do you feel like that's your calling? Why are you passionate about music education? And the parent, and forgive me here, but if I had to choose which parent it was answering this more often than not, my apologies, but it's usually mom who leans in, and if Hilary and I were in the same room, she'd throw something at me right now. But usually it's, who answers the question, and that for me is a big red flag. Not because I think that there's anything really negative, but it means that the student hasn't had a chance to think about why they're doing this, and at some point they have to. And I don't necessarily want to be solely responsible for guiding that conversation. Of all of a sudden you're in music, and you don't know why you're here, and you don't know what you're doing here. So to the degree that you can, for any of the parents that are watching this or will watch it or will listen to it, try to let your child guide the process, and certainly let them talk to the professor or professors in the audition or at the lesson before the audition or anything else. So that is my one thing. What are some of the mistakes that you see commonly? Anyone want to jump in first? Donna.
I'll jump in. I think that particularly for undergraduate auditions, it comes up that students sometimes don't prepare with piano or whatever the accompaniment is, or they don't know really how their part relates with the surrounding parts. And so they may listen to recordings, professional recordings, which is great, fantastic. That's a must, absolutely. And sometimes another mistake is they only have really worked on their part and haven't heard a professional recording. But really, it's so obvious to us in the panel the difference between students that have worked the repertoire thoroughly on all the parts and understand what makes the music tick, versus just knowing their solo line, whether it's flute, clarinet, whatnot. So I think as much as you can prepare rehearsing with piano, even if at the audition you're not bringing a pianist. And so a lot of times at auditions, folks don't even want the other pianist; they just want to hear you. At some auditions, they welcome having your instrument or voice plus piano. Well, I guess voice would have piano, but it's just really important that you learn or memorize or can hallucinate the piano part or the orchestra part along with your part, and that goes a long way.
Other things you've seen over and over again, Chad, yes.
Oh, I was just going to throw in another completely unrelated comment. But
Please.
I was just going to say that your communication to the faculty member is really important, and you always want to present yourself in a polite manner, thinking, for example, about etiquette, even in emailing a professor. I wouldn't address an email, as I've received many, as "Hey you," or "Hey," it needs to be somewhat formal. Dear Professor so-and-so, I'm interested in a lesson. I'm interested in hearing about your program. So I think the way you handle yourself, either on the phone or in a Zoom lesson or in any sort of personal contact via email, Just it needs to be very professional in tone. Everyone sort of is different. Some people are more formal than others. So that's a situation you need to read with the teacher sort of to figure out. But I always err on the side and prefer when students certainly address me more formally. If I have a student that's really informal, it sometimes gets under my nerves, gets under my skin a little bit.
I'm going to just ask everyone to quickly raise their hand if you've been called hey, hey you, or your first name in an email from a student that you don't know. Yeah, stop doing that. Please, please, please stop doing that. It's
called by my first name to my face in class. That's also, yeah.
Yeah. I've had students walk in the lobby of the school where I teach, and they'll say, "Hey, John," and I kind of look around and try to find out who they're talking about, because they couldn't possibly be talking about me when we haven't met. So the fact that we all raised our hand when I asked that question is something to avoid, right? Everybody, Grammarly, for those of you watching or listening, Grammarly is a super useful plugin on Chrome. I use it because I don't always write the most careful emails, but Grammarly helps me with spelling and various other things. So there's no shame in the Grammarly game. So use it as much as you can. Other things, other common mistakes. Anybody jump in here that you would like students to address? Patrick, please.
Well, I can speak to for singing auditions. Singers, of course, have to sing in different languages. And so this presents a lot of challenges that all of a sudden you're singing an Italian or a French song or a German song. There are a lot of repertoire. There are a lot of colleges and universities where you have to sing, different song literature with different languages. And one of the big mistakes is to not know what the words mean. And I've even seen this at graduate level, where it's very clear they don't know what they're singing. And this information is so easy to find now. Even Google Translate is actually kind of okay when you get down into the 18th century, it's really hard because 18th century Italian is really tricky on Google Translate. It kind of freaks out. But you can find this information online. It's really easy. We used to have to go to dictionaries and look up every word, but it's very important that you're not presenting text in front of a panel that knows the text and not have a clue as to what it's about. It's not as simple as this song is sad or this song is happy, because some songs that are in C major are really quite sad, actually, the text. So that would be one of the biggest mistakes I see. Another mistake I see, speaking of formality, I've seen people be too formal in their dress. They show up in tuxedos or long gowns. And we want you to look like a human being, not that you're out making your Carnegie Hall debut. So I think, something that you're comfortable in. I've seen people be very uncomfortable in their dress or in their shoes. So again, for singers, if you are going to sing in heels, but you never practice in heels, you need to practice in your heels. Run your audition with your teacher in what you think you're going to wear. Because that's an important step to knowing what you're doing. With the formality with writing, yes, I've had the, "Hey, Patrick, I love what Mcgill is doing, and you're a cool guy, and I want to know more." That's fine, actually, if you're my student. I'm a first name professor, but that happens after. After I say, "No, please call me Patrick." So that's my chime in there.
If I can just relate for the string world, this is a tiny pet peeve, but it's one, okay? Please uncase and tune before you enter the audition room. I know it seems like nothing, but it's really important that you're uncased. You've already warmed up somewhere else, hopefully, and you're with your instrument at hand, ready to walk in, introduce yourself, and tell us what you're playing and play. The most awkward times is when a student is slowly unpacking in front of the whole audition panel and having the tune. So just a tiny thing.
Well, Gene, I don't think that's an insignificant thing at all. As a percussionist, I really detest having to wait, 5 minutes for someone to set everything up. So I think practicing that part of the audition, this is kind of what I want to get into next. So what should students do before, during, and after the audition? Practice, how do they practice a mock audition? and we could even get into choosing schools in a minute if we want to talk about that. I don't know if we want to say we should all choose all the schools where we work, but I think we could talk about some of that in a minute. But in the lead up to the audition, make sure you've practiced. I think Patrick's point about your attire is good. It's a great comment for singers. I think it's a good comment for everybody. You could always tell the kid that's wearing hard shoes for the first time, right? And they can't quite navigate that, or they're whatever the attire issue is. So practicing that. Your breathing is going to be different. Your stance is going to be different if you play an instrument standing. If you're a sitting practicer, if you sit when you practice, you may not have that option in the audition. You may have to stand in the audition. The room may be much larger. So just try to factor all of these things in prior to walking into the room, and practice having set up your instrument, regardless of the instrument. When you're a little bit nervous, also try to factor in that your warm-up room might be in a different part of the building. We all teach at schools that are kind of large, right? So you might be warming up on the second floor of building A and then walking to the third floor of building B, and it's cold outside and you have to go outside to get there. So how are you going to handle that? How are you going to think about and process that? Those are all pretty useful things for students to consider prior to the audition. So let's just do this. So a student has their list of schools, right? And they're reaching out to the professor and they're saying, dear Dr. Moon, I'm interested in CB, California Baptist University, and I want to do music education. I'd like to come visit the orchestra, and you set up the appointment. How many back and forth emails should it take to set up the appointment? I would like to set it up as quickly as possible, so I would like a student to tell me when they want to come visit. Please don't say, hey, when are you available? Because for me, I'm never available. So tell me when you're coming to my school, and I will do my best to be there. Or tell me, I'm either coming on the 5th of October or the 10th of November, which day works better for you. That way I can pick, but you're not just saying, hey, I'm going to be there in the fall. When are you around? That's really tough. Hilary, please, yeah. Oh, yeah. So don't give us too many choices.
The other thing is that for students to consider is that many schools, and this is part of doing your research about the school, many schools do have visit days. And regardless of how big the school is, if you can select one of those days and be present on the days when they're rolling out the red carpet, that is obviously the best choice for making your appearance and going to hear and learn about the department collectively with people who may potentially be your new studio mates and classmates and people you're going to study music theory and music history with. And taking those as an opportunity is also an excellent time for people to notice you took the time to pay attention to that's when you should go. So that's also an excellent time to visit a school.
So you've selected your school, you've scheduled your visit with Dr. Moon, and you show up at orchestra rehearsal. What are the things that you, and I'm going to ask each of you to answer this in the way that you want to, but when you meet a student for the first time, you haven't worked with them at Swanee or another program, you haven't met them at whatever, this is the first time you met them at your school, what are the kinds of questions you want to be asked? And what are the kinds of things that you think are important for students to ask when they visit you? And Gene, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to do that one first, please.
Well, I'm going to basically carbon copy a visit I had from a violinist and a harpist, twin sisters, that came to my program last week as prospective incoming freshmen music majors. And they almost, frankly, made me a little nervous. Not really, but they did, because they were so well prepared, beyond well prepared. And they came in very polite and they asked the questions, how many music majors do you have at this university? And what are the various ensembles that we can participate in? What is the number of units that are required for the degree? I mean, they did their research beyond research. And so I'm not saying that all of you need to have all those details down, but I think it's important for you to come in with an understanding of, if you're visiting me as a prospective music major, I know this seems odd to say, but make sure that you really want to be a music major and not simply just saying, I just kind of want to, I don't know, I'm just here. So especially because if you come to my university and let's just say you're a double bassist, let me tell you, I'm rolling out beyond the red carpet, right? Because you're a double bassist. But I'm going to, me personally, I will take the time out of my schedule to court you, and to make sure that you're having a great time when you're visiting. So make sure that if you're utilizing the Director of Orchestral Studies time, that you're coming very well prepared, because that's what we all here will do for you as prospective students. You know, when you think about it, you're the consumer. We are the product. In the grand scheme of how entrepreneurial businesses work, as prospective students, you are the consumer. So you have every right to shop around, but there's got to be a little bit of a professional rapport when you do so. And then you'll find the right place.
Gene, that's great advice. Donna, you see
Sure.
like 500 flutists a year. I mean, you play an instrument that a lot of people aspire to do. So
Right.
how do you? What do you?
You know, I really enjoy when they come in and they start. You know, we just talk really frank and honest, and they tell me what their goals are, and then they can start asking me like, what resources do you have at the University of Washington that will help facilitate those goals? And perhaps they can ask some hard questions politely, respectfully. What might be a hindrance? And so, and I think that's great. They're not afraid to ask those hard questions. And so I can talk to them about the different ensembles and the different styles of music and all these things. And I can and they can ask beyond just the university about what does Seattle have to offer, you know, are there collaborations with outside organizations? And this is telling me that they've been thinking about all these other things. There are some folks that might be a biochemistry double degree interest as a major. And if they're asking me those kinds of things, what I know about the program, and I might not know the answers, but it's really helpful for me to know that their mind and their world is that much bigger. And so not all professors, not all schools of music enjoy that kind of thing. But then we can have this dialogue to facilitate like, yes, this is a school that really supports that kind of a thing. Or, you know what, this is not the best idea, but perhaps, you know, I have a great colleague that teaches at a different university and you should check that out. And that is great. I mean, all of us here on the panel, we're friends with so many people at other colleges, universities, and we often refer out because when we meet with a student, we just know there's a different program out there. Like this really smells like a different university, and it's just really great when you can help make that connection. And so I've had a lot of folks refer towards here. It's like, yes, that's exactly what we do. And so, how did you hear of me? Oh, yes, she's a really great friend and colleague of mine. That's wonderful to know that we've made that connection. So I think, you know, if you've made it this far to come to Seattle, meet with me. Perhaps you also have an idea that you want to be an orchestral flutist or a soloist or whatnot, but you also have a side interest in whatever. And so I can talk a bit more about those things.
Great. We're still on. There's a question that somebody posted on Facebook that I want to get to, but we're still on this question of when a student comes to visit you, what are some of the things that you want to talk about? So, I don't know, Chad or Hilary or Patrick, anything to offer? Yeah, Chad. I know you have plenty to offer. Anything to offer on this specific topic that maybe we haven't hit yet? You all have tons of things to offer. Sorry. Chad
Sure.
and then Hilary.
I was just going to say every university is slightly different, and you know, any of us can talk generally about our school, some more or less in depth about different processes. But you know, I want to hear people that ask me questions about the clarinet program at the University of Michigan and all aspects. What do we do? What's studio class like? What kinds of things you cover in lessons? What are your students doing now? What is the makeup of the studio? What kind of majors do you have? Does anyone double major in the clarinet studio? These kinds of questions. And I don't mind hearing questions about admissions procedures and financial aid, but most of those questions I don't answer as well as people in the admissions office or the financial aid office. So I end up saying, well, here's what I think, but check with you know, whoever the person is in our individual schools that deal with specific questions about certain timetables and things like that. So I you know, it's not that I get tired of hearing those questions, but make sure you address those questions to the appropriate individual. I want to talk about, you know, the great things that are happening in the studio and in the area and maybe in the orchestra and the band, these kinds of things.
And Chad, I'm just jump in real quick before we go on. That is a super important point. to just underline, oftentimes the faculty are the least knowledgeable when it comes to the admissions process outside of the audition. So, you know, it's probably just a great piece of advice to say to anybody, just talk to the admissions office, or if the School of Music has their own admissions officer, which a lot of schools do, or audition coordinator, or recruitment assistant, or music ambassadors. Like we have a music ambassador program at Mason where we have student leaders that sort of serve as what, you know, as music ambassadors, right? And they are more knowledgeable oftentimes than the faculty are, particularly if it's a very large school that might make changes to policy that may not get to a faculty member here or there. They change the GPA requirements, the SAT requirements, and students tend to hear what they want to hear, not what may be accurate. So I think it's a great point, Chad, and I just wanted to underline it. Not only should maybe students not address those admissions questions to faculty because it's not super interesting, we also may not know the right answer. And because we're university professors and we always have to be right, sometimes we try to answer it anyway and give you the wrong information. So best to address those to the right offices. Hilary, I'm sorry I jumped in on you there.
What I was going to say was actually very parallel to what Chad just said. And that goes in context with doing research about where it is you're going to interview and who it is that can help you answer the questions. And also knowing what kinds of questions you need to ask based on the type of school environment you are going to audition at. If you're going to a college or conservatory or university environment that's in a large city, that's a different type of question, as opposed to if you're going to an environment where the school is in a small community. That's a different type of questions that you're going to want to ask. You know, how does that school interact with the community? What types of opportunities are there going to be? If you're going to be a student at University of Michigan, how is it that you're going to interact with the larger school campus community? If you're going to go to school in a large city, like at CBU where Dr. Moon is, or at Mcgill University in Montreal where Patrick is, those campuses are in really big city centers, or like where Donna is in Seattle, or John is in George Mason. Those are really big city centers versus where I am in Sewanee, very different campus environments. And so being prepared with those types of questions so you can seek information that's going to help you find the best type of learning environment for you to study your instrument so that you have an achievable outcome. That's really important to find out what it is you are really after and finding out if that school is going to meet that need. And the environment that your School of Music is in is a really, really big part of that. Not just the teacher, but that environment.
That's a really
I have two
excellent
quick
point.
things to kind of add. I completely concur with Hilary about the campus and like the city that you're in, and the questions about like the life, the student life, and that can be research, but also just knowing who you're talking to, and like what is it like to live here in this small town, or what is it like to live in this big city. I love to hear questions about alumni success stories. Like, tell me like your most recent alumni success. And that's a great thing that you can sort of tell then, like, is this a program that's like churning out people who are moving forward professionally. I also like to hear questions about the big buzzword now is portfolio career. So asking about what else can I be looking at. I want to be a great piano major. I want to be a great voice major, but I'm also interested maybe in sound recording, or I'm interested in business, or I'm interested in artistic administration or entrepreneurship. Like what is there in your program that might offer me opportunities to kind of expand my horizons a little bit? Because when you're 17, 18, like when I was 17, 18 auditioning for my bachelor's degree, I had no idea I would end up being a professor at Mcgill University running an opera program. So but luckily I fell into places that led me forward.
There's so much good information here. I'm going to put a question from someone watching on Facebook up here. I think if I do that, you'll be able to see it. You'll also be able to see who's asking it. Full disclosure, Kate's a dear friend. She was working at Temple when I was a graduate student there, and so I'm really happy that she's watching. Hi, Kate. And her son is a percussionist, drum set player and a percussionist. And so you could read the question here, but it says, I'm finding a lot of schools are only offering a visit to classes, ensembles, or meeting a professor after students are admitted. How do you narrow down schools without this opportunity? I'll just say for me, like I'll meet you anytime. Like if you're a sophomore and you're just starting to think about music, studying percussion, and you want to talk to me about it, I'll find a half an hour to sit down with you and talk. And I think, as I've seen, people agreeing here, I think that folks will. So we do pre-audition and post-audition shadow days at Mason, and they're geared obviously for different audiences. So we have kind of a different experience for folks. We call them shadow days. Other people call them, music major for a day, or school visits, or various things. But I know in terms of narrowing, I would offer, certainly communication with the professor, visit campus. I tell people to visit campus outside of admissions days. And it's great to go to an admissions day. It's great to go to a shadow day. But like, that's when we clean the building, right? That's when we like have all our students tuck their shirts in, right? That's when it's like, we clean the lobby and like we stack all the chairs, because everybody does that, right? I mean, the cleanest time you're ever going to find a School of Music is on an audition day. So, which is good, but try to go to campus if you can, realistically, and just like our campus at Mason is very open. You can just park and walk around and, just kind of experience what it's like on a Tuesday in November. You'll get a sense of whether it's the right place for you or not. But if anybody is not, Kate, I would say if there's any professor or school that's not setting up a visit for you, don't go to that school. don't let your child apply there.
May I jump
I'm gonna be
in
quiet.
as
Please,
well?
yes.
If a student emailed me and said that that they're coming, or they'd love to know what it's like to be a day in the life of a student, I'm happy to pair them. I just, send out an email, a blanket email to my studio, and said that we have a prospective student. I don't know this, whether I know this person or not. And it's like, would anyone mind if they followed you for a day? Or, can you accompany them to, if it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday around here on campus, that's our orchestra rehearsals on those days. And so I know that, Kate's coming on Monday. So can you guide her at the 3:30 orchestra rehearsal, and then your, prior to that, the 1:30 theory class and whatnot. And so just show them around, and then you can give them a schedule so that they know when they can be on their own for lunch. But, they have these options, and that you'll meet them at the quad to just have face recognition and then come along and that sort of thing. So that's actually very, very easy to do. It doesn't have to be an established event. In fact, for my school here, we don't have a sort of School of Music tour where someone can shadow the day in the life. That doesn't happen here. But certainly, if people were to come on any random Tuesday, we'll make it happen.
Donna, thank you.
I would
Any
say
other
that
thoughts on this question?
Well, I would say that's how you narrow down the school. If schools are not going to give you that opportunity until you're admitted, then I think that's questionable, frankly. Maybe the school might not do that officially, but I think that a professor that you're interested in studying with, if they have no time for you and aren't communicative until you are admitted, then that might be saying something.
It's an excellent point. Yeah, I think you use your question as a filtering process, and I'm seeing some folks on Facebook here kind of agreeing with this. So, Kate, thank you for the question. Also, your son liked the question as well. Good job. So we've made everybody happy today with your question. I'm also enjoying that I could show comments here on this. This is a fun little feature that I didn't know I had. So this is very exciting. Okay, so other things. So the student now has auditioned, right? They've come to you. They played for you. What are some of the things? And we're getting kind of late in our discussion. We're going to wrap up pretty soon. So we've talked about kind of the selection process. Trying to go visit, read the faculty bios, try to connect. I'm just going to put a plug in here. Try to connect with the faculty prior to your audition, whether it's at a summer festival, hint hint, at a summer festival, or at other programs where they might be working. If you want to look for, to me, I'm going to say this as a blanket statement, you want to look for faculty that are engaged in the profession, that are doing master classes and performances and recitals and concertos and coaching and working with singers and working with other musicians and just doing all of this type of work actively. I always have told students that if it's too easy to get a hold of the professor and they're always available all the time, that may also be a red flag, right? Like, I don't want to be available every Tuesday at 3 o'clock for a lesson, because that means I'm in town every Tuesday at 3 o'clock and I'm not doing anything else. Obviously, it's a balance, and with COVID, we were all home for too long, but you want to look for faculty that are engaged professionally in doing things, and students, and we talked about alumni, students that are doing things that you can see yourself doing. There are great universities that have really strong music education programs. If you're not interested in being a music ed major, it doesn't matter how wonderful that teacher might be, because you're going to go to that program and you're going to be really unhappy. Or they are a very strong performance school, but you really want to teach. It's hard to square that circle. So you need to think a little bit about what you want to do, and also really try to get to know the professor, get to know the environment, get to see what their students are doing, so that you could connect with that. I like to think of having at least a couple of different interactions or touch points or experiences with somebody before they come and audition, whether that's a lesson or a festival or a visit. Because oftentimes, too, the faculty is going to be the first point of contact for scholarship and financial aid, right? So it's helpful for me when I go to the scholarship committee to say, yes, I know this student. They came for a lesson, and they came to the shadow day, and they played a great audition, and I taught them at Swanee the summer before. I feel fairly certain that they're going to come to my school. We should invest in them, as opposed to somebody that I've had no interaction with, didn't return my email, didn't follow up after the audition with an email, until they asked me for money, right? So I will talk a little bit about that etiquette thing in a second. But so just a couple things I wanted to dispense with. Now we're in the audition. The student has unpacked, they've played their repertoire, they've selected appropriate repertoire, as Chad and others mentioned earlier, repertoire that is achievable and makes them sound good, great, and also shows their potential for success, right? You're trying to show what you can do, not necessarily where you are at 17 or 18 years old. Now you've done the audition, and we all ask questions, right? We always have a little Q&A in the audition. My friends, what are some questions that you always ask students that you would like them to be prepared to answer? And who wants to go first on that one? Don't make me go first. I just talk the whole time.
So I always, I'm an arts administrator, and I am very visually inspired by watching students, not the notes, but watching the students. So I'm the most non-music person. I would ask them, or want them to be able to speak to, was that fun? Was it fun? How did it feel? How did you feel doing that? And be prepared. Back to my thing, come up with your story. Be ready to answer. How did it feel? Was it fun? And make sure that it is, because it seems like a lot of the other things don't go right if those things don't happen.
Yeah, I like to ask them what kind of music they like to listen to, and then if it's always, well, Mozart, and I'm like, okay, well, beyond classical music, what do you like to listen to? Because I think that's sort of a little bit of an insight into their brain. I also like to ask them, what brings you to Mcgill? Like, why do you want to come here? And I don't want to hear, oh, because the faculty is so great, and I want to hear, like, what about the program or the university is like drawing you here to that audition. Those are kind of my two basic questions.
I have to say that, and going along with Patrick, you have the battery of questions that you're going to get. Why do you want to do music? Or what kind of music listen to? All those kind of things. But I like to make sure that the prospective student, has an idea of who they are. And so I'll ask some questions like, what's your favorite non-musical hobby? Or what are some of the books you like to read? Questions that the student be like, this is an audition. But I want to make sure that they're well-grounded. And so the audition, as some of you have already alluded to, is that we're trying to get to know you. And this is, with the assumption that you've played beautifully, everything's really good, and you're good to go. We want to make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself by practicing 10 hours a day while you're here, but that you do have a community of life outside of music. So be prepared for the unexpected questions such as that.
I'll say that the one question, the questions to be expected. What do you want to do with your career, and all those things. But the one question that blindsides folks the most is, do you have any questions for us in the committee? I think that always I get the deer in the headlights. Uh, uh, and then, and it's okay if they say, if you say, no, everyone's been helpful. I've been able to talk to admissions, or I met some students, or, but I think I see panic. Their face goes white. And so I think it's normal and to be expected that one of the last questions before you leave the door will be, do you have any questions for us? And it's okay if you don't have questions. But I think sometimes students have, they might say, oh, I felt so stupid. I didn't have a question prepared. Of course I should have made conversation. No, that's not a thing. That's not a test. So, but I just wanted to put that out there, that's just something I think us on the panel, we all notice that awkwardly happening at the audition.
I definitely get that one, the deer in headlights moment. I also, I'll sometimes ask students, and I didn't realize this was a controversial question until I said it in one of these panel discussions, and then I found out that it was. I'll oftentimes ask a student, so what other schools are you looking at besides Mason? And, I see, I'm getting a reaction from some other panel. Patrick, should I not do that? Should I stop doing that?
No, I ask that all the time.
I ask that all the time as well.
I'm constantly interested in that question.
And I think good. Thank you. I feel better. I feel seen, as the kids say now.
Yes,
I felt like that was a
seen.
weird thing. I feel seen. But I do think that there's nothing wrong with that question. I think students should be comfortable answering it, because it's not. And this kind of goes to my larger point of don't read into every word or phrase or question that we say in the audition. When we're doing auditions, we might hear 10, 20, 30 people in a day or more. We may have watched, 90 pre-screening videos prior to live in-person auditions. We may have to get to our kid's soccer game or pick up a spouse from somewhere. I mean, people have lives, right? So we may ask you a question and you walk out of the room going, well, she asked me this, and so that must mean that I'm here on the list. And I know that students sit and parse that. Don't. I auditioned at a school when I was an undergrad. The audition was 40 minutes, which is an insane amount of time for an undergrad. They had me play everything. They had me play stuff again. They took me to lunch afterwards. There was a lunch and they sat with me, and I got on the payphone because I'm old, and so I was on a payphone, and I was telling my teacher, oh, I'm definitely getting in this place, and I didn't get in. And it turns out that they just liked me. Except the way that I played, apparently. They didn't care for that. But we just had a very nice rapport, and they were like, hey, we're done. You were the final one before lunch. Hey, John, why don't you come on and have lunch with us? And I'm sitting there, like, analyzing all of this stuff as if I'm going to get in. And, I was happy with where I went to school, but I'm only sharing this kind of extreme example of this to say that don't read into it. The coldest, least reactive, least responsive audition I had was my number one school that I got into.
Me too. And I can agree. Me too.
Yeah. And that was, that was the audition. I walked out for sure, and I went, man, I'm so glad I got to come visit New York, because I'm never coming back to New York City. And, it worked out. So just don't read into any of it. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here, but after the audition, let's talk about two or three things that students should or shouldn't do after they audition for your studio. And what are the general expectations that you think students should have for the post-audition process? Anybody jump in?
I just want to throw this out there. Oftentimes now students are applying to a lot of different schools. And in making the decision on where you want to be, there are a lot of factors to consider. If you are interested in performance, that student-teacher relationship is absolutely key. I'll speak anecdotally just from personal experience that I chose a school not knowing as an undergraduate the teacher. And I was going with a very name brand school, and I thought it was going to be the perfect fit because the school had such a great reputation. But it didn't end up being a good teacher-student fit for me, and I ended up transferring after a year. So that relationship with the teacher is much more important, in my opinion, than the name on the diploma that you're going to get in 4 years.
Absolutely. And I would say as a reminder to that there are good teachers everywhere, and you go to where that good teacher is that fits you like a glove. And sometimes that's where you hope to be, and sometimes that's not. But that relationship absolutely is super important. You are so right.
Sometimes it may benefit you. I'm going to paraphrase a conversation from a colleague of ours, Laura Rice, when talking about helping one of her students look for a graduate program. Sometimes you want to go somewhere where you're going to have more performance opportunities, because maybe you haven't had a lot of performance opportunities. Maybe you come from a smaller high school program, or if you're an undergraduate looking at graduate schools, maybe because a year and a half and we've been, in COVID. And so you haven't had a lot of performance opportunities. So you might look for a smaller grad program, or in the case of, some instrumentalists, vocalists, perhaps a program that doesn't have a doctoral program, because at some schools, all the doctoral students get all the best roles and all the principal parts in orchestra or whatever. And you might be a really killer master's student as a player or as a singer and not get opportunities simply because there's this other layer of artist there that's just more developed than you. So as somebody, we have all went to, prestigious universities and small schools and big schools. I went to my graduate program entirely 150,000% because of the person who taught there, to the point where I didn't even visit the school until like 2 weeks into the semester because he taught at his house. And so I don't think I went to the campus until like the second week of classes because they didn't have class on the first week. So I'm not advising that, but I made that decision entirely based on who I was going to study with. And, that's an important relationship to have. And that really should be the primary thing. One of the, 1 or 1A that you look at for a school. Gene, please.
Post audition, the big topic and concern and questions that students have are, number one, did I get in? And then number two, how much money? And the scholarship discussion drives everything. Parents that are on this call, that, and students, prospective students, that as well. And my best piece of advice for you, coming from someone who manages a scholarship budget, coming from someone who can tweak your scholarship based upon whatever our conversations are, is if you start that dialogue with me, make sure that you're really genuinely interested in attending my school. If you string me along and then I can just tell you just drop me like a cold habit, here's the concern. Our paths will cross again. They will.
I will remember that you did that.
And I'm not trying to say that to scare you.
I will, Gene.
Yeah.
I will remember.
The reason I say that is because even if you end up not coming to my school, that relationship that we have in that post-audition discussion for those months before May 1, by the way, May 1 is the hard deadline for scholarships. And same thing with NCAA. A music scholarship is the same as an athletic scholarship. It's a contract that we're bound to after May 1. From your audition date to May 1, you can have all the deliberation and discussion you'd like with institutions, but you can't have it with 8 or 10 universities. You've got to whittle it down and be really intentional. If I know that you're genuine, trust me, I'm going to work with you and do my best to get you here. But in the end, if it doesn't happen, it's okay, because you might come here for your graduate studies, or our paths may cross in other facets. You want to make sure that you build a good rapport professionally with that person.
Gene, that really hits home for me, and then I want to open this up to others to wrap up this point about scholarship, because I had a situation with somebody last year who I worked with for 2 lessons. They came to an audition, they came to multiple rehearsals, they kept asking me for more scholarship money. I happen to chair the committee that distributes that money, so I was working with them on that, and we kept meeting their number, and then I found out on April 28th, 2 days before the deadline, that they were going to another school that I didn't even know was in the conversation. And this person actually said to a colleague of mine, not to me, well, that's okay, I'll come and do my doctorate at Mason. And I thought, Maybe not, actually. Maybe you won't come and do your doctorate at Mason. So yeah, I think you really have to be thoughtful about how you handle that. Patrick, please.
Yeah, I would also like to add that scholarship doesn't give the value of you. So like simply because one institution gives you $25,000 and another institution gives you $5,000, that means that does not mean that the one institution values you 5 times more than the other institution. You need to really kind of look at this money situation from the whole standpoint of like, what city is it? How expensive is that city? Maybe you'll be in a dorm the first year, but then you'll need to rent an apartment. What is that like for your, sophomore, junior, and senior year? What is the tuition like? I'll put in a plug for Canadian schools. Our tuition up here is like really much cheaper than down in the United States. Sometimes 50%, sometimes 30% less, or 60% less. But our scholarships are not often what they are down in the States. So even though you might get a small scholarship from one institution and a big scholarship from another, it might actually be cheaper to go to this institution that gave you the smaller scholarship. But you might think, oh, I'm not being valued. In this, scholarships are not about how good you are artistically or what your talent is. It's a whole different situation. How many scholarships are at the school? Who's deciding the scholarships? If it's Maestro Moon, then I guess you better make sure he likes you. But no, there are a lot of factors with scholarship that are sometimes out of control of the institution.
Public school versus private school, in-state versus out-of-state, the needs of the school. If you are auditioning in a highly, Donna and Chad, also, both of you teach instruments that are very, where you hear a lot of auditions and a lot of very high-level players. I know for a lot of schools, the instrument that will get you money just about if you can, walk in and not drop it is the viola. Followed closely by the bassoon, right? I have chased bassoon players around with tens of thousands of dollars, and percussionists that went to the BUTI or Swanee didn't get anywhere near that for Mason, right? Because those are instruments that we need, and some schools really need, if you're a tenor, if you're a vocalist and you're a tenor, you're likely to get more scholarship support than if you're a soprano, likely just based on numbers. So don't factor, don't, I think, Patrick, your point is really, really great. It's not a value proposition. It's not how much we care about you or how good you are. It really does come down to the needs of the school. And often if it's an ensemble-driven scholarship process, which it sounds like Jean's school is, will come down to the needs of the ensemble director. I got to have a French horn. My principal French horn's graduating. I need a French horn, so that kid's going to get money. Irrespective of, how many wonderful, trumpets audition that year. Donna, please.
There are programs where you can get your education for free. And so that does exist. And I don't want to disparage, any education programs, but there might be a reason why it'll be a full tuition for all 4 years or all 2 years or whatnot. But also there are excellent programs, the top that have assistantships and those kinds of things too. So it's the scholarship or the financial support doesn't necessarily mean anything. Is not an indicator of quality, is not an indicator. So I like to guide folks back again to, that, especially if it's in a performance direction, it really is your, that mentor connection means everything. And then perhaps the school and the resources that support it, money has to come in play. We can't deny that. But if that's in the first spot, well, boy, I could name a bunch of schools that if you're holding a flute, and perhaps not even a good one, not even one that works, they might even give you a flute that works better than the one that you have. You've got your tuition paid for, perhaps, housing, and whatnot. So there is that. But come March, April, sometimes we can lose sight of that because it becomes this money hunt, this money rush, if this frenzy. And we kind of lose sight of like, well, this is your education. This is the next 4 years. And I like to guide folks to go with your gut. Like, remember, like for a performance, like who did you identify? Who did you really trust? Who did you really get what they were saying? The vision aligns with that, with your vision, or if you don't have a vision, that you feel like they can fill in the gaps and guide you on your way. And then, you know, maybe all the other spots, hopefully that you have, you know, 2 or 3 options that fall into place there, or one, if you're, but really you just need the one. At the end of the day, you can only be at one school. So that's my 2 cents there.
Last thing about money, and then I just want to go around the circle here for final thoughts or comments. My last thing about scholarship is this, and I think this is probably more accurate, perhaps slightly more accurate for doctoral students, but I think it's true of anybody who receives funding. That funding is connected to service of some kind, right? You're going to play in the orchestra. You might sing in the choir and have leading roles in opera and coach a group and be a TA and do your teacher's lesson schedule and rehearsal schedule. And if you're a doctoral student and you're teaching 2 classes and you're an assistant for the professor and you're teaching non-majors, great, you're not paying for your degree. You're also not you don't have the opportunity to study anything because you're working for a lot less money than you're actually going to work for when you have your first job. So, you know, be thoughtful when you get that scholarship letter, read it, and really think about what are the requirements to that scholarship, and are you comfortable over the course of, you know, X number of years doing football games for a marching band scholarship, or basketball games for a pep band scholarship, or, you know, whatever it is. Those are all great things. I'm not denigrating those at all, but those are time-consuming activities that you know, you'll have to think about as you do this. So as we wrap up here, first of all, it's been great. It's all been really fun to see y'all, and I think we could probably go on for another hour, but I think you would all quit if I did that. So just say thank you in advance to each one of you, Patrick and Hilary, Jean, Chad, and Donna. It's wonderful to get to share these insights. I always learn something from folks I do these panels with, and something I could take back to my own students in my own career. So thank you for that. Obviously, if you want to work with any of these wonderful folks and connect with us and engage with us, come to Swanee in the summers. Applications are open. The website's scrolling across the bottom. That's the biggest plug you'll get from me, but we'd love to see you on the mountain this summer. And I would like each one of you, if you'd like, just to share a couple of closing thoughts for our prospective students that are watching or their parents. Patrick, we'll start with you, please.
Well, gosh, I think one of the fundamental places, or the best places to kind of connect with potential faculty members is at summer programs. And I have to say the Sewanee Festival is such a broad range of people there from kind of all over the United States and Canada. And that for all of the instruments, you know, composition and voice, conducting. So there's a lot there, and I think finding a place like that, if you are in high school or in college, and you're looking to look at, you know, a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, it's one of the easiest places to kind of find them, because you'll see us in our shorts and our t-shirts, all hot and sweaty, kind of at our best and our worst. And I think it's important to do that. You know, you want to find a human being that you can relate to, and that can relate to you, who understands life, and that, yes, we're very serious about, we take classical music very seriously, but, you know, we shouldn't take ourselves so seriously. That's my spiel.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. We're going to go around the horn. Hilary, you're next in my box here.
You know, you're probably going to hear some similar sentiments from the 6 of us, but I echo a little bit to what Patrick's saying and talking about, you know, if you can find a summer program to attend, whether it be ours or another one somewhere across the country or in North America or wherever it may be, I hope you have the opportunity to take advantage of that. Because when I look back to my time as a student, that was really an informative experience for me, both as a pre-college student and as a university student. And I went to those summer programs, and for one, that helped guide me to doing a music degree. And then second to that, when I was at that program, I knew I was pretty devoted to the study of music, but then I also, when I was there, I started looking around at what the people in the office what they were doing. It was like, hey, what are you guys doing in there? And found out that arts administration exists, and that there's more to playing the music notes, and that other things have to happen to make the music notes happen. And that really was an eye-opening experience for me, knowing that there was more happening and that those jobs existed. Because back then, several decades ago, arts administration degrees didn't exist. That's a pretty new phenomenon in this field. And so that's something that was really a good opportunity for me. Go to a music program in the summer. It may introduce you to something you didn't know existed. Sure did for me.
Jean, any final thoughts? Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. Jean, any final thoughts, please?
I think let's not forget what college is. From hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, back in the ancient Greeks, college is a time for you to continue discovering yourself. So whatever degree you choose, it's not going to define the rest of your life. So in my opinion, study something that you're really genuinely interested in and that you're going to go to school happy every day. That's what matters, because there's going to be plenty of opportunities to, let's use the catchword of the phrase of the year, pivot to anything else. So that's my piece of advice to you.
We have banished the word pivot. Other than that, Jean, I loved everything you said, and I agree with it fully.
And Jean, I completely agree with you. I have 4 completely different degrees that are one different from the other. So that's absolutely true.
Chad, no pivoting. Other than that, what do you want to say?
Well, in these unprecedented times, to use another phrase.
Also unprecedented. We're also getting rid of unprecedented. So pivot and unprecedented.
All right. I have two final thoughts.
Please.
One related to summer study. If you think about the investment, which is your degree, it's 9 months of your education in a year. Think about that in terms of your finances and your commitment. You know, you need, in my opinion, if at all possible, to have these summer experiences, whether it's at Sewanee, which is wonderful, or some other programs. It's so important to find different points of view, study with different people, get different ideas, and frankly, meet colleagues that you're going to have for the rest of your career. So that's one plug. So when you're thinking about the financial aspect of it, think about that other 3 months of your education. And lastly, just about choosing a university. At the end of the day, oftentimes it's going to cost, even if, you know, it looks like everything is paid for. And we do, I think, lose a little bit of the idea that it's an investment. And at the end of the day, there is something of value there. By having the experiences that I had in school and the teachers I had, it gave me a product, so to speak, that made me employable after graduation. And I wouldn't take back those opportunities. And sometimes that meant, actually, in my case, choosing a graduate school with lots of student loans instead of the free graduate school option that I also had. And I don't regret it because I had a job when I graduated at that point. That's not a guarantee, but remember, your education is an investment at a certain point.
It's a great point. Great point.
Great,
Donna,
great.
I guess I don't have to introduce you, Donna, because you're bringing us to a close here. No pressure, but everything hinges on how you end our conversation.
Oh, golly, don't say that.
Wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom. Quick.
Well, it's just dovetailing a couple of things. If college is 9 months, if you're thinking, summer break is not a time that a musician should consider that as a break. And so if you have to slave away bagging groceries, or not disparaging that as, way that you have to make money or make ends meet, but you might consider that, a musician is working year round, working musician. And so if you can, consider that during the summer, whatever you can do to gain experiences. I have gone to a summer festival every summer since the 8th grade, and I haven't skipped since then. Even with the birth of 3 children, and they were all born in May, June, I still went to summer festivals during those summers. I'm addicted, and to summer festivals, there's a magic, a certain energy that there's a growth spurt in every way. So I think that's really important to plan if you're going to be a performance major, or if you're an arts administrator, that your summer is an opportunity to gain professional experience. I think summer festivals that I attended were the most like a professional job in terms of performing, because you have just a week to get together material to do a big concert, and the next week of the summer festival is another way to gather repertoire, whether it's orchestra, and then you perform a concert, much like in a professional situation, as opposed to in school, you might work on it for 4, 5, 6 weeks, and then the concert. So I think one should think about that, not just like where they're going to go to college, but also what that sets them up, what they're going to do during the summer too, as they're investing in their whole college experience, or whether it's a 4-year or a 6-year plan.
Donna, thank you. Thank all of you for this. It's really been a great discussion. I love the idea of keeping focused on the investment in your education and that connection with the teacher that you're going to have. I just wanted, before we go, share a couple of comments from folks that were watching. I'm going to assume that since this is from Wanda, this was directed at me. I will take credit for it anyway, even if it was directed at all of us. I don't know when she wrote it, but I'm going to guess it might have been, well, for all of us. We'll all share in that one. Kate had a really nice follow-up for us. She would also like a jazz program, so we'll discuss that. And of course, I think her son would like also to have a jazz program. He's appreciative of his mom's support for that. So it's been great to see you all. For more information about the music festival, visit our website, visit our social media. We have a podcast. Check out all the things that we do, and we really hope to see you this summer. Great to see everybody. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your evening. Bye-bye.